I call Melissa Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And gosh.
Order. Order, cousin. I've called Melissa Lee, who has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, but I almost feel like I have to give the opportunity to the front bencher in front of me, because he does actually have some wonderful lines about the member who just sat down. Sir, I rise to take a call as the government bench's first speaker on this overseas investment, owning our own rule and amendment bill. So for a little while there, while Mr. Phil Goff was speaking, I was thinking maybe he is actually unlike some of his other colleagues, that he wasn't actually going to be having a go at the Asian migration, the house prices. I thought this was actually about land. And even I understand the value of land. Korean people are very strong on land ownership, and they have a attachment to the land, and they value the land. But one thing about land is that it stays in this country. It's not like they can package it up, bag it, and take it back to China or any other country that they can actually take it back to. Sir, I have to say that I am rather disappointed, actually surprised that the honourable member for Mount Roskill is the main proponent of this bill. After all, he is a former Minister of Trade who hopes to perhaps become the mayor of the super city, Auckland. I thought he was actually gunning for the role of the mayor, his worship, next year. And if he did in fact become the mayor of Auckland, he will have to go overseas and look for the investment into the city if he is in fact the mayor. And after all, Auckland is in fact the home to 50%, almost 50% of people living in Auckland are born overseas. And how is he going to explain this bill to the people who will eventually vote for him? I'm just a little surprised. Sir, Mr. Goff, the honourable member, is actually a long-standing member of this House who I actually get along really well with. I do attend a lot of ethnic events with him, as he is the spokesperson for ethnic communities from the Labour Party. But he also claims that he's a champion of working men, and yet he fails to represent 39% of his electorate that are of Asian descent and 3% that are of Middle Eastern descent, and indeed any New Zealanders in his electorate who has families and friends from their homeland looking to invest their hard-earned finances and resources into the better development of this country. And just in case he is actually wondering if I got this data from some ropey data set from a real estate agent, I'll just say that this data comes from the census figure, that 39% of his electorate are in fact Asian descent, and that when his colleague actually calls me 40% Chinese, I have to say that I am 100% not Chinese, and 100% Korean made, but I am 100% Kiwi. I have made a conscious decision to become a New Zealander. I have been in this country 3/4 of my life, almost, but I was just made overseas in Korea. I just can't change that. My parents did the deed. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised and yet not shocked that the former leader of the opposition promotes this legislation. I'm wondering if the member feels that I should be less offended because at least he thinks that this is actually not about a particular ethnic community, that he's not actually having a go at the people that actually look like me, or the Chinese, or that we might actually be mistaken for Chinese just because the surname happens to be Yang or Li or Ling, for example. But I must say they have not had too many issues about non-Asian people buying land in the past, as I fear that in fact Labour Party sold double the amount of land that this national government has actually sold. I mean, we have sold half what the previous Labour government has actually sold to overseas interests, less than half. And I am surprised that they get up now to say that, oh, selling to overseas interests is wrong. You know, somebody reminded me that New Zealand will never get rich selling to ourselves. And that is true. We cannot make milk just for New Zealanders. We're not going to bring in foreign currency into New Zealand by just selling to New Zealanders. And so what? I'm just wondering if Mr. Phil Goff, when he decides that he wants to sell his farm, or maybe he did try, and maybe non-Asian people did not want to buy, maybe locals did not want to buy, maybe it was in fact Asian people who wanted to buy and he had to turn them down because he is anti-Asian buying land, perhaps. I don't know. I'm not going to insult him, and I'm not going to insult him, but I have to actually say, the honourable member is wrong, and I am voting against this bill. I'm just a little bit, sad that Labour has to condescend ethnic communities in this way. It is actually pitiful, and I have to say it does not work. And I think people in this country who are of ethnic origin do recognise what these kinds of policies that Labour is actually proposing as. It is simply racist. It is simply not something that most New Zealanders actually work. It doesn't work. Sir, the former leader, I'm afraid, is showing his advanced years, and I'm not talking about his age. He's actually been here for about 3 decades. A shame that he does not grow in understanding and compassion for those New Zealanders who are of ethnic origin and those applicants coming from distant shores to try and make their dreams of becoming a Kiwi a reality. So I'm just baffled that he doesn't actually get this, because if he holds the portfolio for ethnic communities, he must understand how ethnic communities work. Most people, when they send their children to New Zealand to study English or do high school or university, they're thinking about their future, that when their children become New Zealanders or become accustomed to New Zealand way of life, they often want to buy them homes so that they have a comfortable life while they're living in New Zealand. So they invest in a home, or maybe they invest in a farm because they see a little bit further into the future that when they're looking to retire, maybe, that they will settle in the country that their children have become accustomed to and maybe have become New Zealanders. And so by virtue of that, they would want to invest in this country, and they will eventually move to this country, and many have, sir. And, I'm one of the reasons, I'm a New Zealander. I've sort of had to follow the other way. I didn't come to New Zealand to study and my parents following, but I had to follow my parents, who decided that New Zealand was the haven that they've been looking for. And I had to follow my parents. Typical Asian family, families move together. He must know that most ethnic communities who invest and send their children to school in New Zealand buy houses and land because they hope to become New Zealanders in the future. Full stop. This government has already put a number of measures in place to prepare for situations where there are concerns about potential investors. These measures can be found in the Overseas Investment Act of 2005, and that bill, voted by the honourable member while his party was in government, it strikes the balance between widening the investment opportunities that New Zealand gives to the global community and protecting those sensitive assets that New Zealand care about. I must point out that Mr. Goff, the former leader of the opposition, former cabinet minister, signed off on the FTA with China. He was a beacon, I'm sure, in the past of overseas investment, going over to China many times over and actually telling those Chinese people to invest in this country. And it baffles me, sir, to think that why they cannot see their own creation is in fact working. The 2005 Act is working, like the national government is working, like most New Zealanders who work hard and hope to one day retire to our beautiful rural landscapes. So the foreign investors, businessmen wanting to diversify their stock and set up somewhere they can retire in peace while maintaining a strong connection. So some of the big investors to New Zealand have been, an example is James Cameron, for example, a recent appointment to the Screen Advisory Board, and a resident here in the Greater Wellington region. Look at the owner of Matakauri Lodge in Queenstown, Julian Robertson. He has done so much for New Zealand that we appoint him a rare honorary Knight Companion of the Order of Merit for his philanthropy across our country. But the opposition of Mr. Phil Goff is not about these gentlemen. It's actually actually about the Asian investment that he's actually worried about. It's a knee-jerk reaction to the housing crisis, and I am appalled that he buys into that. And I know that he doesn't believe that, and hopefully that he will wake up, because he will need their vote if he has a hope of becoming a mayor of Auckland. Sir, I oppose this bill.